This week on ANN, Adventists in Fiji ask for prayers after the Court of Appeals overturns an important decision impacting Adventist schools on the island.
A doctor from Loma Linda University is part of a team finding hope for those suffering from the cancer-causing human papillomavirus.
And later, we talked to Dr. Peter Landless and Torben Berglund about what we should expect as COVID-19 restrictions are being lifted.
These stories and more coming up.
Thank you so much for joining us this week.
First in the news, leaders in Fiji are requesting prayers after the Fiji Court of Appeals overturned their previous High Court ruling. The ruling stated that the appointment of state-funded teachers in any school established by a faith-based organization must be approved by the faith-based organization.
The Fiji Mission Executive Committee held an emergency meeting on June 8th to discuss the next steps in the long-running legal case centered around the Vatuvonu Seventh-day Adventist College.
The Court of Appeals held that any religious community which receives assistance from the state in the form of teachers cannot interfere with the appointment of such teachers, nor can the religious community refuse to accept the appointment of teachers on the ground of religion or religious belief or any other prohibited ground of discrimination.
The ruling is being described as a landmark judgment as it was interpreted within the provisions of the Fiji Constitution. Effectively, it means that all teachers paid by the government are seen as civil servants, and thus they cannot promote a specific religious worldview.
The curriculum must also be taught with a totally secular perspective. The only way Seventh-day Adventist schools can teach Bible is for the church to pay those teachers separately from the government.
In a statement, Fiji Mission Secretary Dr. Ronald Stone and Associate Mission Secretary Pastor Apelli Sakudu said that after much prayer and deliberation, the Executive Committee has selected a subcommittee to deeply study the pros and cons of 4 possible options available against the ruling of the Court of Appeals.
The Executive Committee met on Monday, June 14th, to make a final decision. During the meeting, the Fiji Mission Executive Committee considered the 4 options regarding Court of Appeal judgment that overturned the High Court ruling pertaining to the appointment of state-funded teachers in faith-based schools.
Stone said after assessing and weighing the presentations, considering the advice of our lawyers and the legal team, and with long deliberations and continuous prayers, the ExCom decided to appeal the Court of Appeal ruling to the Supreme Court.
Fiji Mission will ask the Trans-Pacific Union Mission and South Pacific Division for assistance to finance this historical and worthy exercise. For now, Vatuvonu will remain as an aided school until the process of appealing to the Supreme Court is completed.
During the June 8th meeting, Stone and Sakudu said, "We earnestly request you all to pray for God's guidance and wisdom. Please pray for the subcommittee as they scrutinize and formulate important information and recommendations. Let us also pray for the ExCom as they make the final decision for the church moving forward."
The Vatuvonu case has been the subject of debate within the Fijian legal system since 2019. It has significant implications not just for Seventh-day Adventist schools, but for the entire educational system in Fiji, largely run by faith-based organizations.
Currently, the Fiji government operates a universal, free education system where it pays staff wages and funds schools around the country. Under its open merit recruitment selection system, the government chooses principals and teaching staff to fill vacancies at both government and faith-based schools.
For more information and to follow this story, visit record.adventistchurch.com.
Adventist children across the North Caribbean recently participated in the World Day of Prayer for Children at Risk. The May 22nd event placed special emphasis on praying for the children of St. Vincent, whose lives were recently impacted by the eruption of the Soufrière volcano in April. Linda Ambrose, Children's Ministries Director for the Adventist Church in the North Caribbean and organizer of the event, said children at risk need to be protected and helped so that they can use their God-given talents to the fullest. They need our prayers. Ambrose shared that her department leaders decided to focus on the children at risk in St. Vincent because so many children are at risk for displacement, homelessness, and other health issues due to the Soufrière volcano. Ambrose reached Elaine Thomas, the Children's Ministries Director in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for 250 names of local children. Meanwhile, on the British Virgin Islands, or BVI, Children's Ministries Director Dolan Henry said they were not intimidated by the length of the list. Henry urged families of the BVI territory to set aside some time to focus on their children and those around the world. Ambrose shared that some people were moved to do more, including sending special care packages to the children they were praying for. Church leaders were reminded that this special day of prayer is reserved for urgent intercession and acts of goodwill.
Researchers have identified a molecule they say can counteract a protein that makes human papillomavirus, or HPV, challenging to eliminate. HPV is a virus capable of causing cancer.
The researchers, including team members from Loma Linda University and University of Kansas, pinpointed the GaOH molecule as a strong contender to counter E6, a protein that behaves like a bodyguard for HPV.
HPV is infamous for causing cervical cancer in women and can also lead to head and neck cancer in men. Under the current standard treatment, these cancer patients undergo surgery, radiation, or chemotherapy that can leave lifelong side effects.
The researchers are hopeful that their findings, followed by the next steps of continued research and clinical trials, will contribute to developing a targeted therapy for patients that promotes good survival, but with less toxic side effects.
Principal investigator for the study and professor at Loma Linda University School of Medicine, Dr. Penelope Dirksen-Hughes said, "For cancers caused by this virus, there is good reason to think that if we focus on virus-specific proteins, we can develop more targeted treatments that will offer patients better quality of life. Finding this molecule that binds to the virus protein is a promising step in that direction."
The screening process launched with a total of 5,000 small molecules to test, a number that dwindled as researchers repeatedly parsed out which particles did or did not display promising abilities to prevent E6 from working. Eventually, the candidates were narrowed down to the best inhibitor molecule, GaOH, which could be developed into a drug used in targeted therapy.
These results offer strategies for developing novel therapies that will secure HPV-positive cancer patients a better quality of life while they undergo treatment. Researchers said the need for such medicines is not only ever present, but also growing.
Head and neck cancer caused by HPV has risen by 255% in the past decades and represents the sixth most common cancer worldwide.
Dirksen-Hughes said these patients are often young men who must undergo intense combinations of chemotherapy and radiation with side effects that decrease quality of life or, in other cases, surgeries that may disfigure.
Currently, women with advanced stages of HPV-positive cervical cancer do not have any good treatment options. The women also face a survival rate of around 15% at later stages. Dirksen-Hughes said a global analysis of the cancer reveals that women suffering from cervical cancer disproportionately reside in underserved areas or populations.
Given the growing prominence of the cancers caused by HPV and health disparities linked to them, optimizing a treatment approach translates to prolonging and improving human lives.
For more information, visit news.llu.edu.
Coming up, we talk to Health Ministries Director Peter Landless and Associate Director Torben Bergland about what we should expect as COVID restrictions are lifted.
We'll be right back after the break.
Welcome back.
Right now, it seems that COVID-19 restrictions are lifting worldwide. And even though there are some regions of the world struggling and still need our prayers, more and more people are able to get back to their regular lives.
But does that mean that everything will go back to exactly how it was before the COVID-19 pandemic? Do we still need to exercise some caution?
Well, during a recent ANN In-Depth, Jennifer Stymiest talked to Health Ministries Director Peter Lanlis and Health Ministries Associate Director Torben Berglund about what we should expect post-pandemic.
Working from home has been very, very pleasant, but it's taken away the demarcation between work, home, play, relaxation, and the other thing, it's liberating to have that routine. Now, Torben has spoken very eruditely and eloquently and accurately on the importance of not being isolated.
Yes.
We have been in a phase of isolation. And you know, I've come into the office from time to time. I've not been here every day by any means, but I have come in, and I've right throughout the pandemic. But coming in now that there's the possibility of opening up brings a different mental frame to the whole picture. And as you say, bumping into people, meeting people, greeting people that, although we've seen them on Zoom, we haven't interacted. Zoom is a blessing, no question about that. But it's a problem as well, because one misses the body language. It's fine when you have three people in a conversation like this. You can catch nuance, you can pick up the body language a little better. But when you're sitting with 20, 40, 60, 100 people on a screen, it's really not communication at its best.
Yeah.
The other thing, the community is so important. There are a number of people in our building and who live on their own, who live by themselves. This has been an extremely difficult time for them. And I think this reintegration into a schedule, into a routine, back to whatever normal is going to be. And I was thinking about your comment. What is life going to be like after COVID? None of us know, because COVID's not gone.
Yeah.
We're right in the midst of it. We're at a stage where you're saying, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Yes and no, because we don't know what is next. So I think this coming back is a very good thing. I think it's a positive thing. It needs to be well managed. And it also entails that our mindset is adjusted to getting back together. And I believe it's going to be liberating for many of us. For me, it most certainly is.
And we've been so isolated for so long. Are we in danger of stretching ourselves thin, fitting all, almost trying to make up for time, the time we lost?
But I think in that, like making it a priority, the reconnecting a priority, like there's many other things that we've been focused on during this pandemic and kept us busy with. Maybe one of the important things now when we have the opportunity is actually in our lives to prioritize reconnecting, visiting friends and family when we can. Some of us, we've been away for a long time. I'm planning when everything's open up, I can go and visit my family. I'm actually going to spend quite some time with them, more than I normally would have done, just because like I've been away for such a long time. In our contact also, like with colleagues also, like to take some extra minutes to sit down and talk with one another, sort of what's happened, how are you, that kind of things, so we like really can get back into being in relationship, because that's what we are. Like when we are colleagues, we are in relationships with one another. It's not just sort of a work collaboration, but it's real people with real needs, and we have that also. So I think that is important, to be intentional about the relationships as we enter into the weeks and months ahead.
Yeah.
I think Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think there's another very important issue, Jennifer. You've talked about freedom. We have freedom. I think we need to realize that freedom comes with responsibility. And when one is free and you have freedom, you need to exercise accountable responsibility as we do that. And so that will guide, hopefully, my decisions, my plans as to how I integrate back into the setup. I took a plane flight a few weeks ago, first time in 16 months. I was fully vaccinated, scared spitless as I got into the airport. I'd forgotten what an airport was for, and I thought it was where they park these antique relics that we'll never use again. And that whole process was a liberating thing, to sit and look in the aircraft, look out of the window and say, wow, there is life beyond Silver Spring. There is still a beautiful world out there. And we also have been inundated with so much news, so much reporting, so many conspiracy theories, so many tragic issues, and it's affected our mindset to a great extent, and all of that needs to be recalibrated.
Well, I think it's important that we still have some patience. It's not a well-defined timeline ahead of us, and we know that in some parts of the world they are in the midst of it, and it's really bad situation. So around the world, people are at very different stages of this pandemic, apparently. And we also see that sometimes things open up and then you see increased numbers, and then they have to tighten down on restrictions again. And I think we just have to still be patient and be flexible in how we deal with it, as Dr. Landa said, or Peter. That even in this building, if we see something happening, like an increase, like we may have to sort of backtrack a little bit until we move forward. But the thing is, it doesn't look like this pandemic is going to last forever. It looks like we are going to get through it. It's a question of time. So just having that patience still, even though we want predictability, we want to know sort of what to plan for. That's something that is, I think, inherent in us, a need we have. Yeah. But still, we will probably have to still be patient for a while, and be patient with authorities who try to be responsible, have every intention to manage this in the best possible way. So also listen to them, what they say. I think that is very important. If they tell you don't have to wear a mask, well, you're still free to wear a mask the rest of your life if that's what you want. But it's probably not necessary. Not a good idea to do that, and I think that will be a challenge for some. Like some will throw it away immediately, others will be reluctant. Is it really safe? Now we've gotten so used to it. I remember in the past we would see tourists from Asia. They were always wearing masks, and we'll wonder what are they thinking? It's sort of they're overly careful. Now many of us find ourselves in the same situation, and it's difficult sometimes to actually I felt that myself. Even if I can leave the mask behind, sort of it's that is also a threshold to step over. Not putting alcohol on whenever we see a dispenser, not going there and getting a dose of alcohol on our hands. That's still something that we have to readapt to a world where we don't fear the coronavirus all the time. But we'll hopefully get there soon.
Don't forget, you can watch ANN In-Depth each week on the Adventist Church's YouTube channel, and you can also subscribe and listen to our podcast on Spotify.
Coming up, David Trim is here for This Week in Adventist History.
But up next, Adventists in Mexico City are finding ways to reach out to their Jewish neighbors.
We may look, pray, read, think, worship, sing, and share differently, but we all look forward to the Sabbath. And we all look forward to the future when Jesus will come again. With this message in mind, we arrived at a core component for a new identity system, the creation grid, a simple 7-column structure for layout. The grid is a reference both to the prophetic timeline as well as to the creation week that culminated in the seventh-day Sabbath. Regardless of what or where you are designing, you can always find information to help you communicate that we are all Seventh-day Adventists.
Welcome back.
Adventists in Mexico City are trying to reach the large Jewish population in the city.
To reach their needs, they are working to build a Jewish Adventist cultural center in one of the areas with the largest Jewish population in the country.
Adventist Mission has more.
Of all the places in the world, you may not expect to find very many Jews in Mexico City. But Adventists here are praying for this large, unreached people group. Mexico City is one of the largest cities in the world. Its metropolitan area is home to almost 22 million people, but only 65,000 Adventists. That's less than half of 1%. Rather than being spread throughout the city, most Adventists only live in a few specific areas.
We realized that we had a great need in a certain area of the city. In the West Zone, historically, it had never been possible to have a church in this part of the city. There have been many outreach attempts, but for 4 years, God has been wonderful, and miracle after miracle has been leading us to this day.
Given the area, the place where we are, geographically, sociologically, and economically speaking, we have a profile of people to reach. We are in the middle of a community that has everything. We are surrounded by people who live materially and physically well.
Knowing that the people also have spiritual needs, church members are starting a Jewish Adventist cultural center in one of the areas with the largest Jewish populations in the country. About 40% of the population is Jewish, which is why it is sometimes called Little Tel Aviv. In the 2010 census, the Jewish community in Mexico was about 67,000 people. Many of them are descended from immigrants who fled persecution and marginalization throughout the past centuries.
We realized that the strategies that always worked in common churches, this part of the city could not be reached. So we began to study what programs our church has worldwide.
I am very happy because we are in an area of the city where there was no presence before.
There are currently no Jewish Adventist congregations in Mexico. As Adventists in Mexico City take the next step, they need your prayers. With the new Jewish Adventist Cultural Center in a strategic area, they are confident that God will perform great miracles. Thank you for your faithful support of Adventist Mission worldwide and the mission offerings.
Watch this and other mission stories online by visiting adventistmission.org. Then click on videos at the top.
And finally, for today's episode, let's turn to David Trim for a look at Adventist history.
This week, we hear about the opening of the Washington Sanitarium, which is now the new Adventist Healthcare White Oak Medical Center.
Welcome to This Week in Adventist History. On June 14 in 1905, Kansas Sanitarium opened in the city of Wichita in the U.S. state of Kansas. The Nebraska Sanitarium had opened a branch clinic in Wichita in 1902, and in 1903 the Kansas Conference brought Dr. George A. Droll in to become its director. Under his leadership, the clinic's mission expanded, and thus in 1905 it became a sanitarium, with a school of nursing attached. New buildings were constructed in the heart of Wichita, and by 1917, more than 1,000 patients were being treated annually. However, thereafter, a decline set in. By 1928, the debts of Wichita Sanitarium and Hospital, as it had been renamed, were so significant that the Central Union Conference felt obliged to close the hospital. It's a reminder that church institutions don't always go from strength to strength, that sometimes they have to be closed for the good of the mission. But in contrast, 1 year and 364 days after the opening of Kansas Sanitarium, Washington Sanitarium and Hospital opened on June 13, 1907. After the move of the General Conference headquarters from Battle Creek, Michigan to Washington, D.C. in 1904 and 1905, church leaders took the opportunity to found a new sanitarium in a city that had not previously had a strong Adventist presence. Dr. Daniel Kress and his wife, Dr. Loretta Kress, who had been medical missionaries in Australia, provided leadership to the new institution, which proved a success. In 1973, it was renamed Washington Adventist Hospital, and just 3 years ago, it opened a new campus and was renamed Adventist Healthcare White Oak Medical Center. One of the oldest continuously operating Adventist hospitals in the world, today it is a 180-bed acute care hospital that treats some 70,000 patients annually. And on June 15, 1862, the Vermont Conference was organized by several small congregations in the U.S. state of Vermont, which had a total of 45 members. Albert Stone was elected the first chairman and Stephen Pierce the first secretary. Vermont later was to become the first conference to give its entire Sabbath school offering to missions, a practice which of course later became common. Today, Vermont is part of the Northern New England Conference. And that was this week in Seventh-day Adventist history.
Thanks for watching ANN. Join us next week for more news from the headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Did you know that the Adventist Church has a YouTube channel where you can watch ANN videos, ANN in-depth, and plenty of other amazing videos on prophecy, health, and Bible study?
Just go to YouTube and search for the Adventist Church. Click the subscribe button to make sure you're caught up each week.
And remember to leave a comment or a prayer request, because we have people who are praying for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And before we say goodbye, here's some good news from the book of Job, chapter 1, verse 21.
The passage says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised."
That's our program for this week. And remember, you can always visit Adventist.news for daily news and videos. Until next time, God bless.
Take care.